Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 743 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And today's episode is going to be all about the breaking news from yesterday. As fate would have it, I recorded yesterday's episode, and then right when I was done, right as I was posting, the episode and setting it to go live on YouTube, we get an announcement that the Rangers have agreed to a 2-year extension with Jimmy Vesey. And at first glance yesterday, I said that I like this move. Today, I got to be honest, guys, I love this move. I think this is a really smart deal for both sides. I think it makes a ton of sense. It is a 2-year extension, so Vesey will be with the Rangers for 2 more seasons after this one at $800,000 per season, just a little bit over the league minimum, which is, of course, $750K per year. But basically, just going to get into all the details why I think this is a great move for the New York Rangers and also for Jimmy Vesey. I will also acknowledge some of the concerns because not everybody loved this move. There might be a couple people saying, why make this kind of a commitment to a guy that's been on a PTO for 2 different teams in the last 2 seasons, kind of just a journeyman at this point. So I will at least acknowledge some of those concerns, but I'm also going to explain why I don't think it's anything to get too worried about. And we will also go through some of the biggest winners and losers from this move for the Rangers. And I think it goes without saying that Jimmy Vesey is one of the winners, but we'll get into some of the other winners and losers a little bit later in today's episode. But for starters here, just the basics. Once again, Jimmy Vesey, 2-year extension with the Rangers. He will make $800K per season in the 2 seasons following this one. And once again, he was in camp this offseason with the Rangers on a PTO, and he ends up making the team and is currently signed, as of yesterday, before yesterday, he was signed to just a 1-year deal worth $750,000, which is, of course, once again, the league minimum. And it's interesting to hear the details about this, kind of the behind-the-scenes, details. Basically, that this deal came together pretty quickly. The Rangers approached Vesey and his camp about potentially signing an extension with the team. That happened on Tuesday, and by Wednesday, the deal was hammered out and completed, and obviously done without much fuss and without, too much back and forth. And it sounds like both parties were pretty excited to make this happen. But as for Jimmy Vesey, he is currently 29 years old, so he'll still be just 31 when this contract is over. And this season for the Rangers, he skated in 38 of a possible 39 games. He was a healthy scratch for 1 game, but that was a long time ago. It was pretty early in the season. And he's played well for this team overall. He's got 6 goals and 6 assists. He is a +4. He's averaging 13 minutes and 38 seconds of ice time per night to go along with 52 hits and 25 blocked shots. And again, I think this is a move that makes a ton of sense for both sides. If you look at it from the Rangers' perspective, it's just the quintessential low-cost, low-risk move. You're getting somebody here who is a strong defensive forward, can kill some penalties for you. He's got a little bit of position versatility. He can play the right wing as well as the left wing, and somebody that is just a veteran presence on a team that's still pretty young, and obviously now in his second stint with the Rangers, so there's some familiarity there, having played with the Rangers in the past. And overall, I just had a really nice season with the Rangers. I thought this most recent game that the Rangers won against the Hurricanes 5-3, snapped the Canes' 11-game winning streak. I didn't really get a chance to talk about this too much. I thought Vesey played very well in that game, particularly on the penalty kill. He's just a buzzsaw on the PK. He just pesters the puck carrier. He seems to always have good position. He got a shorthanded scoring opportunity in the game against the Hurricanes. Stole the puck, went in, almost got the puck through the 5-hole. There was at least one instance, too, where the Canes on the power play were trying to gain entry into the Ranger zone. Vesey was right there, stood them up at the blue line, knocked the puck into the neutral zone. So just one example, and, that's the most recent game, but I thought Vesey played very well in that game, as well as, just for the entire season. I think he's had a really nice season for the Rangers. And, I say that acknowledging the fact that Jimmy Vesey is not going to, in all likelihood, become a superstar player in this league the way that certain people might have thought that he was going to be when he first came in to the NHL and during his first go-around with the Rangers. But for the things that he does them very well, and has been a really nice pickup for this Ranger team. And something else that we've talked about on this show in the past is, you're going to need, if you're going to be a championship team, you're going to need certain players to outperform expectations. And I'm not just talking about superstar players. I'm talking about some depth pieces, some guys that come in without a whole lot of hoopla, without a whole lot of, pomp and circumstance, guys that just come into the team and they play their role and they do it very well and outperform their contract. And Jimmy Vesey is one of the guys that's certainly doing that. There's other examples, Ben Harper for sure. He was at the start of the season at best the Rangers' 8th defenseman, and he slotted into the lineup and done a nice job too. But to keep the focus on Vesey here, another reason why I like this is the very simple fact that, kind of connecting the dots here and going by a couple of things that Jimmy Vesey said in regard to his contract extension, it just feels like Jimmy Vesey really, really likes being in New York, really, really likes being a member of the New York Rangers. And this is somebody who, again, he got his start with the Rangers, was here for 3 seasons, and then was traded to the Buffalo Sabres. And ever since that happened, he's done nothing but basically just bounce around the league as a journeyman. He went from the Rangers, again, played 3 seasons here. Then he went to the Sabres, to the Leafs, to the Canucks, to the Devils, and now back to the Rangers. So he's played for 6 teams in the past 5 years. And, seeing that happen and seeing the kind of start that he was off to this season. And it's interesting because Larry Brooks actually had an article just a couple of days ago about why the Rangers should look to extend Jimmy Vesey. And of course, now it has come to fruition. But the thing that was interesting to me and the thing that kind of stood out to me about Jimmy Vesey is what he said in regard to his contract extension. It's something that I believed was probably true, and that's the very simple fact that Jimmy Vesey probably just wants a little bit of stability. He probably just wants to be on the same team for more than a season. He probably wants to go into an offseason knowing that, okay, I'm going to be a member of the New York Rangers, and not having to worry about if anybody's going to call him or if he's going to have to settle for a PTO, which is what he's had to do in each of the last 2 seasons, first with the Devils, now with the Rangers. And again, it just made sense that Vesey would probably jump at the chance to sign an extension. Clearly, he's comfortable here, has played a good role for this New York Ranger team, and again, probably just looking for stability after, bouncing around the league for pretty much his entire career. But this is what Vesey had to say after the contract extension was signed. The age-old saying is that money isn't everything. I think that it's very relevant here. I'm happy here. I like it. The situation has been great. I'm familiar with the city. I know some guys on the team. I know the staff. And then I have a lot of college friends that are in New York. It's just great for me, and I feel comfortable here. So to be able to get it done, it was a no-brainer. And, I also have to believe, and this is something that, other people have weighed in on as well, but, Vesey's played well this season. Again, you have to keep your expectations in check. If you're expecting him to put up the kind of offensive numbers that he did in college when he was winning the Hobie Baker, you're going to be disappointed. But if you're going to expect somebody to just be, a solid depth piece and somebody that plays his role very well in the bottom 6, then I think you're going to like what you get from Jimmy Vesey. But I also have to believe that Jimmy Vesey, had he just let the season play out and, whatever happens with the Rangers, and then it's the offseason, and he's an unrestricted free agent, and he can talk to the Rangers as well as the other 31 NHL teams, I have to believe he could have done better than this. Again, he signed for just 2 years at $800K a season for the Rangers. I have to believe that based on his play so far this season and what was likely to continue this season, he was putting up a pretty solid campaign, and I got to believe that he could have done better than 2 years at $800K. Maybe he could have gotten a 3rd year, or maybe he could have, settled for 1 or 2 years, but the average annual value is a little bit higher. I could see Vesey, had he hit unrestricted free agency, maybe getting a 2-year deal worth $1 million per season to $1.2 million per season. It's always a little bit difficult trying to project these contracts. We've been surprised before. Somebody seems to get overpaid, somebody seems to get underpaid, but I do think that Vesey certainly could have done a little bit better for himself, just by the simple fact that he'd be able to talk to every team and not just the New York Rangers. But something else, forget about the money for a second, and I know money's important, and a lot of these guys are going to sign with the highest bidder. And again, props to Jimmy Vesey for, not going down that road and choosing to stay with the Rangers. There's a human side to this as well. Got to remember here, Jimmy Vesey, for his career, once again, has become a complete journeyman, bouncing from mostly bad team to bad team. I know he was on the Maple Leafs there, but that didn't work out at all for him. Kind of fell out of favor there and then wound up on the Canucks. But Vesey, through his career, has had by far the most success as a member of the New York Rangers. He's, once again, playing very well for this team this season in his bottom six role, or mostly bottom six. We saw him on the top line for a while there. But in his first 3 seasons in the league, and once again, these were all with the Rangers, Vesey had 27 points, then 28 points, then 35 points. Those are the 3 highest totals of his career. And like I said, he's had to bounce around from team to team, and his game has really kind of fallen off. So I would imagine that given that he's had, once again, the most success of his career as a member of the New York Rangers, this is somewhere that he wanted to be. And that's another reason why I think Jimmy Vesey is a likable player, and you can kind of get on board with this deal here that the Rangers struck with Jimmy Vesey. And one other thing that I wanted to point out here, Jimmy Vesey, I alluded to this just a second ago, he's mostly played for bad teams in this league. He has not been in the playoffs since 2016-2017, which was his rookie season with the New York Rangers. That's the only other time that he's been in the playoffs. The Rangers obviously had a nice run in the postseason last year. They have a chance to get back there and perhaps do some damage this season, maybe go on another big run. I have to believe that Jimmy Vesey likes the idea of being part of that. I would imagine, your only playoff appearance was in 2016-2017. I would imagine as a player, you want to put an end to that streak and go play some postseason hockey and maybe get yourself a championship. So, to me, it just made all the sense in the world, both for Vesey and also for the Rangers to come to this agreement here. The Rangers, you can kind of stabilize their bottom six a little bit. It opens up some possibilities. You know that he's going to be here. You can now put more money toward your RFAs like Miller and Lafreniere and Hedl, and you don't have to go out and get some veteran to play in the bottom six and potentially overpay that veteran. Once again, Vesey $800K, only making $50K more than the league minimum. So it just stabilizes everything, and Vesey's played well, and I think this is a bargain. When you look at what Vesey has done for this team this season, he has played better than $800K per season player. I don't know exactly, how much money exactly that he deserves to be making this season, but it's more than $800K. And if he keeps playing the way that he has this season and in the seasons to come, I think this has a chance to be a very nice contract for the New York Rangers. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I do want to go ahead and acknowledge a couple of the concerns that maybe certain Ranger fans might have as it pertains to this Jimmy Vesey extension. Again, I don't think it's anything to worry about, but I'll at least acknowledge them and try to explain why I don't think it's cause for concern in any of these instances. There's 3 reasons that I'm going to get to. Also going to discuss the winners and losers of this contract signing by Jimmy Vesey. And I certainly think there's more winners than losers, but we'll get to that as well. We'll do all that good stuff in just a second. But first, I just want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and hockey, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So I did want to, once again, just kind of acknowledge the concerns and any of the worry that certain Ranger fans might have. I mean, going by social media, and you can't always tell for sure, but what I've seen has mostly been positive. I think most Ranger fans feel pretty good about this extension given to Jimmy Vesey, but there's at least a couple in the minority here that maybe aren't quite sold on it. And to me, there's only 3 reasons why I can come up with that this might not be a good thing, but again, I'm also going to explain why I'm not worried about it at all. So, for starters, the first reason, what if Jimmy Vesey's play just slips? I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think this first half of the season, or approaching the halfway point of the season here, this is the best that Jimmy Vesey has played in a long time. He's bounced around the league, hasn't really had a ton of success, hasn't really done a whole lot since he left the Rangers the first time around. And even in this offseason and in the one that preceded it, once again, Jimmy Vesey was apparently only good enough to get a PTO. Now, he made the Rangers on a PTO, just like he made the Devils last offseason on a PTO, but he's been bouncing from team to team. And the most productive season that Jimmy Vesey has had, at least in terms of offense, since he left to the Rangers, was the season immediately after he left the Rangers for the first time. He went to the Sabres via a trade, and Vesey that season had 9 goals and 11 assists for a total of 20 points in 64 games. That is the high water mark for Jimmy Vesey in terms of points since he left the New York Rangers. The reason I'm not too concerned about Jimmy Vesey's play dipping is, a couple of things. For starters, he does a lot of things for this team that I don't think you have to worry about slumping. Scoring can always slump, but the reason the Rangers re-signed him is not for his scoring prowess, or at least that's not one of the big reasons, because he doesn't really have scoring prowess. He can chip in from time to time. But the reason that the Rangers re-signed him, good defensive play, good effort on most nights, a gritty player, good penalty killer. These are things that don't typically slump that often. These are things that if you bring this to the table and you do these things fairly well, it's not going to suddenly just evaporate. Jimmy Vesey's penalty killing ability is not going to go away. Jimmy Vesey's effort is probably not going to go away. His strong defensive play probably not going to go away. And as I mentioned earlier, he's only going to be 31 when this contract ends. So it's not like he's going to, get older and just his play's going to fall off a cliff. Nothing like that's going to happen. And once again, for all the things that he does for just $800K a season, I don't think there's anything really to worry about here. I can't picture a scenario where in the future we're looking at this situation, whether it's next season or the season after that, and we're saying, man, I can't believe we're paying $800K to Jimmy Vesey. This guy's killing us. This cap hit is just absolutely handcuffing this team. Not going to happen. Again, he's only $50K more than the league minimum allows. So there's nothing to worry about there as far as like an overpayment for Jimmy Vesey, and I don't think there's anything to worry about as far as, his play dipping is concerned either. The next thing, and this kind of leads me into the second thing here, salary cap ramifications. Once again, I'm not worried about this at all because he's only $50K over the league minimum of $750,000 per season. So in a way, a roundabout way, you could kind of make the case that Jimmy Vesey is essentially only costing the Rangers about $50,000 because you need to fill the roster spot somehow. And even if you let Jimmy Vesey walk in free agency and you bring in somebody else, the least you could possibly sign them for, once again, is $750,000. So why not spend an extra $50K on somebody that has exceeded expectations and is probably going to be a bargain this season? Once again, I cannot picture a scenario where Jimmy Vesey's contract is causing all kinds of salary cap hell for the Rangers, and we're in a situation where, we can't re-sign, Kako in a few years, or we can't re-sign Lafreniere this upcoming offseason because Jimmy Vesey is making $50,000 more than the league minimum. So I'm not worried at all about the salary cap ramifications. One other thing that I'll throw out there, and this one has some merit, but it's the idea that Jimmy Vesey could potentially block the path of a prospect to get to the New York Rangers. I can't be the only Ranger fan that wants to eventually see guys like Brian Hoffman and guys like Will Cooley, guys that are highly thought of in the Ranger organization, but I'm not too worried about this either, and part of the reason for that is there are ways to make room for a Brian Hoffman or a Will Cooley that will not be hindered by the fact that Jimmy Vesey is on this team. For starters, there's other candidates that you can move on from. Sammy Blais, Johnny Brodzinski certainly come to mind. Blais will be a UFA after this season ends. Brodzinski will not be a UFA until after next season, but he's somebody that you can always place on waivers for the purposes of sending him back to the minors. If he gets claimed, he gets claimed. I like Brodzinski. I like him as a swingman. But you can make room for one of the prospects by moving on from either a Sammy Blais or a Johnny Brodzinski. It doesn't have to be Jimmy Vesey that gets cleared out of the way to make room for a Brian Hoffman or a Will Cooley. And there's other options too. Somebody like Vitaly Kravtsov, I've said before, I don't think he's going to be a Ranger for life. I just get the feeling eventually the Rangers are going to move on there and probably look to trade him at one time or another. Julien Gauthier is another one. Gauthier has 9 lives as far as his Ranger tenure, from him not being protected in the expansion draft to being exposed to waivers to him asking for a trade this past offseason, but he's still here. Once again, though, one of those players that probably not going to be a Ranger for life. So there's other options as far as veterans, or not even necessarily veterans. A couple of them are veterans. I guess Blay and Brodzinski you can consider veterans, but even some younger guys like Krasov or Gauthier, you can move one of them out of the way, or two of them out of the way, if you have to make room for a Brandon Offman or a Will Cooley. So I don't think Jimmy Vesey is going to get in the way there. I don't think that's a concern either. So I get certain concerns from Ranger fans about this signing here, but again, I just don't think it's going to really cause problems for this franchise going forward. And once again, I do think Jimmy Vesey is a really nice value player for the Rangers and somebody that's going to give you a nice return on this investment here. Just $800K a season for the next 2 seasons. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to get into some of the biggest winners and losers from this Jimmy Vesey re-signing. I'm going to explain why Barclay Goodrow could end up being a loser from this re-signing. It's nothing that he did wrong, and I like Barclay Goodrow, and I'm not trying to push him out the door, but there could be some ramifications from this re-signing as far as Barclay Goodrow and his future on this team is concerned, and I'll explain why in just a second. All right, so winners and losers from this Jimmy Vesey 2-year extension with the New York Rangers. And as I mentioned just a second ago, I think it's at least possible that one of the losers for this long-term ends up being Barclay Goodrow, because I think with the re-signing of Vesey, Goodrow now could become a trade candidate. And before I go a second further, let me just say, I'm a big fan of Barclay Goodrow. I really like what he brings to the table, does a lot of good things to help this Ranger team win. The thing is, he does a lot of the same things as Jimmy Vesey in some ways. I do think Goodrow is overall the better player. He does everything just a little bit better than Jimmy Vesey, a little bit more physical, probably a little bit better of a penalty killer, comparable at least. Both really strong defensive forwards, maybe Barclay Goodrow a little bit more so. And Goodrow has actually added some offense to his game this year as well. So when I throw out the idea of Barclay Goodrow potentially being traded this offseason, it wouldn't happen in season, I don't think, because the Rangers have, designs on hopefully winning a championship this season. But I don't do this lightly, because Goodrow is a good all-around player for the Rangers and has fit in very seamlessly ever since he came over here. But even though Goodrow is the better of the two players between himself and Vesey, when you look at what they're making per season and when you look at it in terms of value per dollar, so to speak, Goodrow is making $3.641 million per season, and Vesey is going to be making $800K per season. So when you look at it that way, it could tip the scales a little bit toward Jimmy Vesey. And of course, we've talked about the cap crunch on here and how the Rangers have to re-sign all these players, and then you look at cap friendly and you look at the money that these players are making, certain players, and it's like, okay, well, is there a contract that we could trade? Is there somebody that the Rangers could look to move in order to open up some cap space and re-sign some of their young guys? And when you look at it, I mean, for starters, you can't trade any of the really big name players, the guys that are making a ton of money, because they basically all have no move clauses. Panarin, Mika, Kreider, Fox, and Trouba, they all have no move clauses except for Adam Fox, and you would never trade Adam Fox. I don't even know why you would entertain that idea. So with all that in mind, you look at kind of the second tier of players, and okay, is there somebody else who's making a good amount of money, not a staggering amount of money, but enough money where moving him could open up some possibilities for the Rangers, once again re-signing some of their young players? And I think the one that really sticks out when you look at, once again, cap friendly and who's making what money, it's Barclay Goodrow, $3.641 million per season. And, again, I don't say this lightly because I really like Goodrow's game, but it could be kind of a necessary evil here, because Goodrow, again, when you look at everybody else on this Ranger roster here, he's the one that, makes enough money where it could be worth it to potentially move on to from him. And Jimmy Vesey is somebody that could step in and play a similar role that Barclay Goodrow plays, and then you can once again re-sign some of your younger players. Now, it is worth pointing out that Barclay Goodrow does have a modified no-move clause for the duration of his contract, but he can only block a trade to 15 teams. So that leaves you 16 more if you're the Rangers to negotiate with if you want to eventually look to move Barclay Goodrow. And again, I do not say this lightly because I really like Goodrow's game. I really like what he brings to the table for this Ranger team, but the Rangers are going to have some difficult decisions to make this upcoming offseason. And once again, it is at least possible that this Jimmy Vesey extension here kind of sets the stage to potentially move on from Goodrow. I can't say that for sure. Maybe you find a way to keep Goodrow, re-sign these young players. Maybe there's a way to make it happen. I mean, you look at other contracts on this team. I hesitate to even bring this up, but Ryan Lindgren is making $3 million per season. Under no circumstance would I trade him, though. I've talked about this in the past. Ryan Lindgren, the heart and soul of this team, and anytime he's not on the ice, it seems like the Rangers basically fall apart. You look at the playoff series against Pittsburgh last year. You look at a couple of instances earlier this season. Lindgren is somebody that's really needed by this Ranger team, and he even makes a little bit less than Goodrow. So, a Goodrow trade is something that certainly cannot be ruled out, and it's possible that this Vesey extension here could set that in motion. And again, I'm not necessarily pushing this for this to happen, but I'm at least acknowledging the possibility that that is something that could take place this offseason as the Rangers look to open up a little bit more cap space and give themselves a couple more options in terms of re-signing their young guys. I think a winner for this is certainly the Ranger penalty kill. I talked about this a little bit earlier in today's episode, but Vesey's been a buzzsaw on the PK for the Rangers this season. He had a heck of a game while the Rangers were shorthanded in this most recent contest against the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think Vesey, penalty killing's been a strength of this Ranger team over the past couple of seasons. Vesey's come in and done a nice job there. So I think, going forward, once again, I can't see Vesey's penalty killing skills just eroding. He's going to continue to play that role for this Ranger team. And it's even possible, next season or maybe the season after that, we could eventually see maybe a little bit less of Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider on the PK. Neither of them are really that old, but, they're not like super young anymore either. And maybe you look to give them a little bit of a break in terms of their time on the PK and, their time on the ice overall, for most games in the regular season. I wouldn't necessarily campaign for that either because they're both very good on the PK, but it's at least possible that, they look to wean them off of, the PK at least a little bit in the years to come here. But I don't know that that'll happen because, once again, they both do excel in that role. I think another loser from this situation, the 2-year extension for Jimmy Vesey here, is probably Sammy Blais. Whatever small chance there was that the Rangers would bring back Sammy Blais after this season, I think it's pretty much gone now. Blais is making $1.525 million per season. He's a UFA when this season ends. And that salary doesn't sound like much, and it's not much. But once again, when you have to give new deals to guys like Lafreniere and Hedel and Miller, that's too much money to be giving to Sammy Blais. I think the only way possible that Sammy Blais will be back with this team next season is if it's at the league minimum and probably on a 1-year deal. And even that doesn't seem too likely. And the fact that Jimmy Vesey is now going to be in the fold going forward, that's just one less roster spot for Sammy Blais to claim here. So I think it's probably even more likely than it already was that this will be Sammy Blais' final season as a member of the New York Rangers. As far as winners are concerned, I would say the Ranger bottom 6. We've talked about this a little bit throughout the episode here, but we've talked again, over time on this podcast about how the Rangers do have a little bit of a top-heavy team. That was especially apparent early in the season when it seemed like, nobody other than like Trocheck, Kreider, Mika, Panarin, and Fox could contribute offensively. And the Rangers have kind of rectified that a little bit. Some guys have stepped up. Kakko has stepped up. Hedel has stepped up. Goodrow has stepped up. Miller's stepped up. He's getting a couple more points recently. Maybe a couple other guys as well. But again, this resetting by Jimmy Vesey solidifies the bottom 6 a little bit. Vesey, again, not going to be an offensive juggernaut, but he's somebody that's going to be very reliable in a bottom 6 role and somebody that, once again, just kind of solidifies the bottom couple of forward spots in the lineup. So the bottom 6 is gets a little bit of a boost from this Jimmy Vesey re-signing, and once again, at a very, very reasonable price for the New York Rangers at just $800K per season. Another loser, I would say, and I include myself in this, Ranger fans who want Tyler Mott back with this team because, Mott, he came over at the trade deadline last season, did a nice job, seemed to really win over Ranger fans in a very short amount of time, and then he signs with the Senators in free agency, but only a 1-year deal. Senators probably going to be sellers at the trade deadline this season, and, the Rangers could still bring back Mott, it's possible, but the fact that Jimmy Vesey is in the fold makes it a little bit less likely. I think that they would, bring Tyler Mott back. Maybe you could. But, either way, Mott is going to be a free agent after this season. And the fact that Vesey is going to be here, I don't think the Rangers would sign Tyler Mott to a contract because he's making, I believe, $1.25 million right now, somewhere in that area. And I just don't think the Rangers will go that high when they've got Jimmy Vesey, who could do a lot of the things that Tyler Mott can do for less money. So I don't know how likely a Tyler Mott reunion is past this season once he once again becomes a free agent. Wanted to just throw that one out there. Winner, I'll say Chris Drury. Drury has gotten some mixed reviews from Ranger fans, but he brought in Jimmy Vesey on a PTO. Vesey made the team. He's overperformed. And this is something else we've talked about earlier in today's episode and just in general. But if you want a championship team, you need some of your lower cost players to overachieve and give you more than you thought that they were going to get. So this is a savvy, under-the-radar move for Chris Drury. I know there's Ranger fans that will never, ever forgive Chris Drury for the Pavel Buchnevich trade. I understand that to a certain extent. A lot of Ranger fans really like Buchnevich. Buchnevich has played well in St. Louis. But I do think that Drury, since taking over as the Ranger GM, has had more hits than misses. And this would certainly qualify as a hit. Once again, Jimmy Vesey certainly outperforming expectations this season. Somebody that was in on just a PTO. And something else that I'll mention here, I have to believe that as far as guys around this league who were with one team or another on a PTO this offseason, I have to believe that Jimmy Vesey has probably done as well or better than every single one of them. I mean, maybe I'm forgetting somebody, but who was on a PTO this offseason that, first of all, made his team? You have to do that in the first place. But made his team and has given more to that team than Jimmy Vesey has given to the Rangers. That has to be a very short list, if there's even anyone on it. It might be Jimmy Vesey, who has done better than anybody else that had to settle for a PTO this offseason. So you have to, appreciate what Vesey has done. Again, taking the bull by the horns, having a strong preseason, and contributing to the Rangers this upcoming season. But one other winner that I'll throw out there weren't too many losers. I mean, I really had to reach for a couple of those, like Ranger fans that want Tyler Mott back, including myself. But I think another winner here is just the young players on the New York Rangers. Vesey is somebody that has experience playing here. He does a lot of the little things right. He's a smart player. And if the Rangers didn't already have 400 alternate captains, you could even make a case that he could be in the running for that. I don't think it'll happen because there's just too many guys ahead of him in the pecking order. But Jimmy Vesey, given his veteran status on a still young team and given his style of play, in theory, I don't think he would be a bad choice for an alternate captain. I don't think it'll happen for the reason that I just mentioned. There's a lot of alternate captains right now, and there's no real reason to make a change. And even some guys that are not alternate captains, like Fox and Lindgren, would probably be ahead of Vesey in the pecking order. But, Jimmy Vesey's somebody that I could see Gallant liking, and maybe, if this was still a team without many options as far as alternate captains are concerned, then maybe Vesey could be in the running. But somebody, again, that due to his veteran status and his style of play, a valuable player and somebody that I think can help the young players along as well. And I figure I'll leave you guys with one more quote from the man himself, Jimmy Vesey. This is what he had to say regarding his contract extension. "I love being here. I've met a lot of good friends and good people in the organization. To me, it's just that I feel comfortable here and always wanted to be here." And you have to like hearing something like that. So, again, I understand certain concerns about this, but I think this is a really nice signing for the Rangers, and good for Jimmy Vesey, because he went out there and he earned it this year. No more settling for PTOs and waiting for his phone to ring in the offseason. He is locked up with the Rangers for the next 2 years. So that'll pretty much conclude today. Just wanted to mention real quick, we've got Czechia versus Canada for the gold medal in the World Juniors, and we've also got U.S. versus Sweden for the bronze. And, of course, the Rangers going to be back in action tonight against the Montreal Canadiens. Canadians have lost 5 in a row, but it's still a tough place to play. I'm sure Chris Kreider's going to hear it from the Montreal faithful, but hopefully this is another win for the Rangers. Can't have a letdown here. Rangers have lost too many games to bad teams this season, and that's a trend that's got to stop. And hopefully the Rangers go in, take care of business, and get 2 points against a team that, frankly, they should beat. But that will pretty much do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL Prospects podcast, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL draft. Locked On NHL Prospects, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.